Now, former politician turned TV presenter turned into part-time politician again, perhaps, we don't know. Nigel Farage has challenged Rishi Sunak to a live TV debate on immigration as he branded the small boats crisis a national security emergency.
Yes, in an article for The Telegraph, he accused the Prime Minister of calling the snap election because he knew his plan to deport migrants to Rwanda simply would not work.
Well, speaking of heated debates, in the last hour, Nigel Farage has got his oar stuck into another one. Do you get an oar stuck into a debate? I'm not quite sure.
He stuck his oar in.
There we go. But he's taken to social media to accuse the BBC of bias by claiming that he used, quote, customary inflammatory language when discussing migration. He was actually just quoting an EU politician. But let's take a listen.
About the wave of, and I'm using his words, not mine, aggressive young males that are coming into Poland, having crossed the Mediterranean, and he has said that this is now a matter of national security.
Nigel Farage with his customary inflammatory language there at a Reform UK press conference. He declined to stand for a seat, but we will have more.
Well, that was Geeta Guru-Murthy, the BBC presenter, saying that he used customary inflammatory language.
Yes, so Nigel Farage has gone onto social media and said that this is an example of BBC bias. So joining us now is Howard Cox, Deputy Leader of Reform UK and Parliamentary Candidate for Dover. Howard, just your reaction to begin with to that BBC clip we just played. Nigel has come out and said this is BBC bias.
Well, before I say that, I'm not the deputy leader. I'm just a spokesman for Reform UK. But in terms of
I'm
actually...
terribly sorry, Howard.
No, I've been promoted. I said thank you very much, Emily.
Well, it seems
nice
that our little name badge down there has accidentally promoted you. We'll get that fixed. Do go on.
Just to be clarify, it's David Ball and Ben Habib underneath Richard Tice as the leader. Anyway, yes, I mean, it's typical BBC. I was at that conference today, in Dover. I'm still in Dover here now. I'm in the Working Men's Club. We're about to do a lot of interviews and photography with our candidates down here. No, it's typical BBC. They can't actually rest. They just simply don't like Nigel Farage. And, they use the word customary. It's not necessary. Let's talk about what's happening. This immigration and all the issues that are happening in this country is really impacting on everyone's lives. The cost of living, the whole aspect regarding immigration needs to be addressed. And at the moment, the elephant in the room continues to be brushed under the carpet by Labour and the Tories.
Well, what the BBC might say to that, Howard, is that Nigel Farage is known as a controversial politician. He does speak in a way that perhaps some other politicians don't. And perhaps it's true that the language that he was quoting there from Donald Tusk, the Prime Minister of Poland, former EU Council President, perhaps that was inflammatory language and perhaps it was right for the BBC to point that out.
Yeah, but they don't need to do it in his customary methodology of speaking. It's wrong. I mean, Nigel, you know Nigel better than anyone at GB News, and he's a guy that's passionate and cares about things. He's the most influential politician of the last 20 years, and I wouldn't be in Reform UK if he'd left the party. I would definitely not be in Reform. He's an inspiration and an incredible icon for me, and I do get very angry with the way certain parts of the media attack him.
And Howard, just moving on to the Reform UK's general campaign, how are they doing in terms of candidates? Because I know there were some gaps. Yeah,
I think we got less gaps than the Tories. I think they're missing about 200 seats at the moment in terms of trying to fill. We've got 800 people on our list, and we're going to stand in 630 of them, except Northern Ireland. So it's everywhere in Scotland, Wales, and England. But yes, we're doing, and they're being vetted. They're being very checked. But obviously with the fact that...
Because that is important, Howard, because obviously everyone knows you. You've, of course, been a figure in the media for many years now. But, of course, Reform UK has run into problems with candidates. We saw this in the local elections. I think I lost count of the number of candidates who had to be stood down after relatively fruity social media use was exposed. It is a problem for your party that perhaps more vetting is required than some of the other parties.
Well, I think it's the same vetting should be for anyone that's standing. People who vote want to have trustworthy politicians, and we act quicker than most of the others. I promise you that. I've seen some particular, nasty anti-Semitic stuff from Labour, and I've seen some, particularly nasty things from the Tories regarding Islamophobia. Those are the sorts of things I've seen on social media. I'm afraid social media is almost impossible to police.
And do you think campaigning purely on immigration is enough to get out the vote? It does. I mean, Nigel Farage, Richard Tice have called this an immigration election, haven't they? So is that enough to just focus on one issue?
Well, we're not going to focus on one issue over the next 6 weeks. You'll sit here next week that Richard will be launching things about our taxation policies, etc. Very much. I mean, I've stood, when I stood in London as London Mayor, which obviously I was unsuccessful, I stood on the fact of, a lot of things to do roads like ULEZ, etc. And then we talked about things like tripling the number of policemen to make people see, visible policing on the streets. And the third thing was affordable housing. All of those are in the contract with the people that Reform UK has. And I really implore people to read it. I think you'll find a lot of people have come across once they read our policies.
Well, Howard Cox, former London mayoral candidate, now parliamentary candidate for Dover for Reform UK. Thank you for your time. We'll let you get back to the candidate meeting you have there.
Yes, now GB News has reached out to the BBC for comment. They've got back to us and they say that, please note, on the BBC News channel at 12:19, Geeta Guru-Murthy said, now an apology. Earlier today, we heard live from Nigel Farage speaking at that election event we just saw. When we came away from his live speech, I used language to describe it which didn't meet the BBC's editorial standards on impartiality. She goes on, I'd like to apologise to Mr Farage and viewers for this. Wow. So an apology.
Well, let's see if we can get that clipped up and played out, because that seems to me the BBC admitting their impartiality. But it's very, very good of them to have corrected that in a timely manner.